So everybody, thank you so much for joining us and for watching Bacurau and for staying for the Q&A. We have with us tonight Kleber Mendonça Filho, who's the director. Born in Recife, Brazil, Kleber Mendonça Filho began his career as a film critic and journalist, writing for newspapers and magazines, as well as for his own site, Cinemascopio. As a director, he experimented with fiction, documentary, and video clips in the 1990s. He migrated from video to digital and 35mm film in the 2000s. Neighboring Sounds, Mendonça's first feature film, had its world premiere at the International Film Festival Rotterdam in 2012 and was Brazil's entry in the race for the Oscars. The New York Times listed it among the 10 best films of the year. His second feature film, Aquarius, starring Sonia Braga, was in competition at the 69th Cannes Film Festival in 2016, before being nominated for a César at the Independent Spirit Award. In 2019, Bacurau, co-directed by Juliano Dornelles, screened in competition in Cannes and was awarded the jury prize. Kleber was also a film programmer for the Instituto Moreira Salles in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo, and the artistic director of Janela Internacional de Cinema do Recife. His films have received more than 120 awards in Brazil and abroad, with selections in festivals such as New York, Copenhagen, and Cannes. Tonight, we're also so happy to have with us Emilie Lesclaux. And Emilie is a French producer and political scientist who is based in Recife, Brazil. She's produced over a dozen films and television series, including several of Kleber's films, such as Bacurau, Aquarius, and Neighboring Sounds. She also recently produced O Atelier da Rua do Brum, directed by Juliano Dornelles, who is the co-director of Bacurau. In 2007, she co-directed the short film Jogo Sem Gandula. And it looks like we have our projector up.
Can you see us?
And
yes, I can.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Kleber. My name is Glenn Heath. I am the film professor of the class that we're in right now. Thank you for being here. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, perfectly.
Okay, wonderful. I'm joined here by Emilie, and we're gonna start the Q&A. The first question I wanted to ask both of you was kind of about this theme of historical memory in the movie, and just to kind of get a sense of what was going on in Brazil at the time that inspired you to address this really important theme of how do we document our history, how do we keep it alive, how do we kind of resist against those forces that are trying to erase people.
Emilie, will you?
No,
should I?
Oh, I can
Right.
just say to start that, yeah, I think memory and history has been in all of Kleber's films. It's these are themes that are very dear to his heart, and it has probably something to do also with his own mother, who was an historian, and it's very in Aquarius, the lead character is inspired by his mom, and the memory is a very clear theme in the film. And in Bacurau, yes, also, and the history and the history of violence of this community. But as far as the political aspect, as I said in the introduction, the film was written over a long period. So I think, and when we shot the film, Bolsonaro was not elected yet, so we were not in the Bolsonaro years, but we were in already a very difficult moment after the coup in Brazil in 2016. So of course these events influenced the writing, and well, I will let Kleber complete.
Yeah, that's a good way to start answering. It's a complex question. I think I have also been fascinated by the idea of archaeology, not so much, the actual science of archaeology, but very much in terms of what we find under our feet. There are a couple of moments in the film where you can see bits of biological history from the region. There is the jaws of a shark stuck by the side of the road at some point. It's the camera makes a very special effort to show that there is something on the surface or just below the surface. Udo Kier's character towards the end, he's almost bitten by some strange tooth. I think I'm very much interested in the history of violence, trying to understand how someone has become what he or she is, and it comes from a sequence of events in the past. And I think the community of Bacurau was built on its own history. They have a history, and it belongs to them. It's in their blood, and it's a violent history. They probably learned from history, and they try to be peaceful, but when something happens, it's almost like they're programmed to react. And I think the discussions myself and Juliano had over so many years writing the script, we talked a lot about history. A lot of what the script is informed by observing bits of history, the Second World War, the Vietnam War, what the Soviets did when they invaded Afghanistan, what happened before the Americans went to Vietnam with the French in Indochine, the war in Canudos, which took place in the late 19th century, about 1,000 kilometers from where we shot Bacurau, which is essentially is a war and a massacre. So all these elements added to our own perception of that very particular region, the Sertão. This is where the film comes from. So there is a lot of history built into the idea of the script.
Great. My second question is for you, Kleber. It involves, so all of your films in one way or another are dealing with these themes of kind of institutional corruption and inequality and kind of the subtle nuances of modern Brazilian culture in those ways. But Bacurau is dealing with these themes in a much more explicit and in a much more overt way through genre. And I just wanted to ask you, what was the inspiration for you both in making this film in terms of the genre films, the history of genre? Obviously, the Western comes to mind, John Carpenter's films, Assault on Precinct 13. So I'd love to just to hear a little bit more of your what inspired you to kind of delve into genre through this story.
Well, I suppose my generation grew up feeding on genre films, unlike the two generations that came before mine in Brazil. I grew up watching these films. I started watching. I discovered John Carpenter when I was a teenager on VHS, and to this day, he has never gone out of fashion in my house. He's still, I think he will always be a great filmmaker. And when you feed on so many films, it's only natural that, I mean, it's just like when you discover, you know, the early books and the early classics, they stick with you, and somehow they will be part of who you are. So, but of course, I would never just, you know, make copies of the great films that made me who I am. Luckily I managed to make my own films, and I think this is what I'm doing. So, you know, we got together, me, Emilie, and Juliano, to develop this script because we had a short film in 2009 at the Brasilia Film Festival, which is quite a big deal if you have a short film, if you're a short filmmaker. And the film is a 25-minute sci-fi-ish mockumentary about climate change, and it was incredibly well received. In fact, this short film became quite a phenomenon in Brazil, and we were so excited and touched by the reaction to the film that we thought, well, I mean, every time you blur the lines of reality and you go into some crazy idea and you put that in a film, the effect is so dramatic. You know, people react in such an outrageous way, and this was something that it was very inviting in terms of developing a clear genre film. Because if you look at Neighboring Sounds and Aquarius, I think they have elements in the camera and in the sound that will take them a few times into genre. But Bacurau was very liberating because it would always be very clearly genre, and it's liberating when you establish the tone right from the beginning, and you keep building on that. And I think when you exaggerate, it just becomes very liberating. It's liberating when you have when you can actually blow somebody's head off. Of course, it has to be built dramatically, but then at some point it actually makes sense for you to go there and to be so extreme. And it's wonderful to get hold of Panavision lenses from the late 60s and early 70s and shoot widescreen vistas, and there you have it. You have a Western, and a community, of course, and the community has an underground. So all these elements, they definitely would not be in Aquarius and Neighboring Sounds, because those are different films with different stories, and each film has its own set of needs. But in Bacurau, it felt great, we loved the whole experience.
You both never put a label on what kind of film you would make, and I think at the end the result is it's very difficult to say if it's a sci-fi or a Western or a horror film or even a war film at the end. So this mix is interesting for me as an audience watching the film.
Well, for me, it's great when I read reviews and I see the person struggling, what is this? I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, it starts in outer space after all. So
yes.
This question's for both of you, but maybe specifically for you, Emilie. We have a lot of production students in my class, and as a producer, what were some of the challenges that you faced bringing kind of this film to the big screen? Because as anyone who's made a film knows, it's one of the hardest things you can do. So.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me the challenge was we had done films in the city before, and this was the first film that took us, really far from home in a very isolated place. So I didn't really know what to expect, and we chose. Well, we had to find the perfect place to be Bacurau, because after all, the film, the main character is this place, this community. So we traveled, for a long time in the Sertão to find the perfect place. And when we were really desperate at the end, we couldn't find it because it was written, to be isolated. You could only access by one road, and it was surrounded by hills. So when we finally found it, we were really happy, but at the same time, the location was not easy. It was really far from the first town. The road was terrible. It was, quite complicated. And when we finally started pre-production, it started raining like it never rained in 7 years. And it was a very arid place. And the Sertão, it can rain, but it changes completely. The nature explodes and it turns green, and it wasn't the location that we had chosen. So this was the first, we had to decide, what do we do? Do we, postpone and lose a lot of money because we had already started working? Or do we embrace this new look and also all the challenges, the logistics of doing the film with rain? And so we went for it and we took a risk. But yes,
flash floods.
Yeah, yes. And in terms of production, it was really the hardest thing that I had done, because a lot of, problem, mainly the access to the location. It was most of the scenes were in the village, and sometimes if it rained, there was a stream became a river that we couldn't cross, or we couldn't go back to the town where we were, and we couldn't sleep in the village because it was so tiny. And so yeah, we made it to the end, but it was with a lot of stress and but for the people of the village, they were so happy that it was raining, that it was mixed feelings, because it brings also a lot of joy to the people there.
The town the town where we were, the priest in the town, he had a mass for special thanks to the film crew who brought rain after 7 years, and that shows the kind of the meaning of rain in the Sertão. It's so dry, so when it rains, it's something really special. But little did they know that we actually the image in the film we had thought of it as a kind of dry. So interesting cultural shock there.
Also, the second big challenge was the cast, because it was a very big cast, and also a lot of extras, and it was really that was really great for me as a producer. And from the beginning, when we started casting and choosing the actors together, and then when we finally got to the location and we had a lot of work finding, because in the village there were really few people, actually much less than in the film. So we had to bring communities from the surroundings work with us, and then we chose these people to work with the cast. So the extras and the cast worked together. That was a really very beautiful job that the directors and the casting coaches did into integrating the people from this place with the cast, and we were, they worked like a family during 3 or 4 months, and at the end it was difficult to to end the work, but
Yeah, you can really feel the connection that
yes,
they've made.
and some people that were only extras, they became, they have close-ups and lines, and they had such presence and great faces and presence that they had to be, appear more than we initially thought of.
I want to say thank you to our special guests. Thank you for being here, Emilie, and thank you for Kleber for joining us via Zoom. Great
Thank you,
film.
everyone, for.
Thank you for being.
Everyone's clapping. Great. Thank you all for being here.